has been an age-old question that people have had for a very long time. What is the greatest video game console of all time? Gotta be honest. I know it's a boring choice because it's always seen as the best one. But the Atari Jaguar, just I'm with you. No, the Atari Jaguar, I never played on one of those. Little before my time. But I'll tell you one that I did play on a lot. The Super Nintendo. Specifically, my Super Nintendo that I remember we got for Christmas. And the amount of hours I spent playing Super Mario World and F-Zero, Mega Man X, Star Fox, Super Mario All-Stars. The list goes on and on. Turtles in Time. There's just so many games, and I have some up there. You know, we have The Legend of Zelda, Link to the Past. We have Donkey Kong Country, Killer Instinct, Pilot Wings, NBA Jam. Oh my gosh, the rivalries me and my cousin Zach would get in over playing NBA Jam. But there's also another argument to be made, and that is the PlayStation 2. I mean, it's kind of hard to deny the effect that the PlayStation 2 has had on society. And, I mean...
Controllers feel small.
Yeah, it does. And that's so weird, dude.
I'm used to playing with a DualSense 5 all the time now.
Yeah, I was going to say, like... one of those next to a PS2 controller. Look at that. Look at the size.
Look like they're about the same, but this one's just got a little more bulk to it with all the haptic stuff.
Well, not only that, but also the handles go down more.
Yeah.
The handles go down more. Yeah.
Xbox 360 small controller they made later.
Yes. And
I think that was later that they made that one, wasn't it?
Well, I'll say this.
This is my favorite controller of all time. I fucking love these things.
I would say for me, it's still like the Xbox 360 one. Like whatever Microsoft was on, they hit a home run with that one. And I know you don't like the offset sticks. That's fine. I know that. But if I had to make a choice, I would say the PlayStation 2 is one of my other favorite ones. Because the DualSense 2, and even though there's stick drift, here's the thing. You're never going to get rid of stick drift. Stick drift will always be a thing, no matter what.
This particular controller is kind of past its prime by a long shot, you can tell.
Yeah, I mean, the sticks don't want to...
That's not going back to the center like it should.
No, it isn't. They need to be cleaned out, if I'm being honest. I know someone who can.
This one just feels like it's also all the springiness and stuff. It definitely does not feel good anymore.
No, it doesn't. It definitely does not feel like a fresh one. Well, yeah, that thing's brand new, dude.
Yeah.
And once again, this one here, I will say this, the tactile buttons, like the concave buttons, the Y and the X buttons, and then the more convex buttons like B and A, and then like the pause and select on this, and then the shoulder buttons. The little shoulder buttons up here made so much of a difference. And just to be fair, this is a knockoff one. It doesn't feel the same.
Oh, yeah.
I have one. There you go. Now that's an OG SNES controller.
Yeah, it's so small.
I know. It's weird. But I like this one here, the 8-Bit Do. The 8-Bit Do controller feels so good in terms of its responsiveness. This is how, in terms of the buttons, this is how the buttons used to sound and feel on the original SNES. Just I always like that sound. And then the shoulder buttons, and then and then your thumbs on here. The rubber that they have for the start and select buttons are so perfect. I just love that so much. But yeah, this right here, these controllers have stood up so much to the test of time and are considered two of the best controllers of all time. In terms of 2D games, absolutely. In terms of the birth of 3D games, or more the perfection of 3D games, yes. And then, of course, you have your outliers, which I know there's a lot of people who are fans of this, the old school like two button NES controller, which this thing's a classic, but it's
I played with those a lot too, but I'm not really a big fan of them.
Yeah, and
how squishy the buttons, spongy the buttons always felt on them.
Yeah, that's one thing about it that I always felt too. But I will say, for me, my favorite oddball controller that I will say, for me, still stands up, even all these years later, the Wavebird. I will never, ever question the Wavebird again in terms of its like wireless capabilities, its ability to like just be seamless and not have any delay. And also the fact that the batteries last so long. Huh?
It's a step up from like the N64 controller.
Yes.
But I still don't like it very much.
And that's fine. You see, once again, there's controllers that just don't work for some people. Yeah, the little nub, the little nub and C button. I wish this was the same size as this one. If it was, I think this controller would be like near perfection in terms of what I like. But so close. But they still got so many things right with this controller. So much right. But anyway, I guess we've rambled enough and showed how old we are.
And you know what those consoles got right that this one hasn't at all yet?
What's that?
They're fucking libraries.
Ugh. Well, once
Super
again,
Nintendo and PlayStation 2 have just the two of the best libraries in console generations.
Yes. I have a whole segment of PlayStation 2 games over here. Like, this is my whole library of PlayStation 2 games.
And I can probably think of 25 you don't even have on that shelf that are just
exactly.
as good as those.
That's the thing. That's how immense the library is. But yeah, that's my library of PlayStation 2, and here's my library.
The Silent Hill 3 is mine.
Huh?
The Silent Hill 3 is mine.
Yes, that's true. And the copy of Silent Hill 2 I have upstairs is yours as well. And also, here's my SNES library. Need to work on it a little bit. There we go. So yeah, those are the two best libraries in gaming history, I must admit. And yeah, greatest console of all time, the Super Nintendo or the PS2? Which will it be?
Among the greatest debates of all time, one could argue is what is the greatest video game console of all time? I mean, what could be more important than that? Maybe the meaning of life, but we already know that. It's video games, so touche on that one. When determining the best video game console, the problem is that there are so many different consoles and so many games for each of those consoles. Add them all up and yeah, it's a lot. More than anybody could have possibly had the time to play. Even if you did cut out some things to free up more time. Whoa, easy there, buddy. You might as well keep brushing your teeth, because even if you did play every game,
I've been playing that
console to form an opinion, somebody will just tell you you're wrong anyway. Yeah, everyone can give their own personal opinion.
It's too late.
Goodness knows I've seen plenty of, this is the best console ever.
I've gotten really good at getting demon horns or demon fangs.
I mean, why not just assume it's better than all the other consoles and games you didn't play? Maybe because it's not fair? Oh, oops. But even if you have played every console, we're still all very much biased in our own personal special ways. So, while having a perfectly unbiased opinion is out of the question, here's the approach I'll be taking for this video. The two consoles I've seen mentioned more than any others as the best consoles ever in all my years of talking to people, scouring forums, comment sections, watching YouTube videos, eavesdropping on conversations of people walking down the street, and just about anything else I can get my hands, eyes, or ears on are the Super Nintendo and PlayStation 2.
Yes.
I've even seen some threads comparing these two consoles directly to each other, which might seem like an odd comparison if it weren't for the fact they're both so highly regarded. I mean, you never see threads comparing the 3DO to the PlayStation Vita. And sure, yeah, I know, right away some people will say they've seen different consoles mentioned more frequently than the Super Nintendo and PS2 as the greatest ever.
I think the runner-up's the 360.
The reason I see these two consoles mentioned so frequently is this. They're thought of by many as the best consoles in their respective generations, which just so happens to also be the generations I see most frequently brought up as the best generations. The 4th generation and the 6th generation.
Yeah,
and again, yes, I understand that plenty of people prefer the Genesis over the Super Nintendo or the GameCube over the PS2. That might even very well describe my personal thought.
As much as I love the GameCube, as much as I admire it and I love its library personally, I relent and I will say that the GameCube is not as important to gaming as the PlayStation 2. I freely admit that, but I will say I did enjoy the hell out of the GameCube, and it got a bad rap for a lot of reasons, including the dumbest reason being the fact that Nintendo went with like the mini discs instead of the full-size DVD discs, which basically kneecapped their third-party support. And you all wonder why third-party developers didn't want to work with you for so long.
All I'm saying is what I've noticed, which is that the Super Nintendo and PlayStation 2 seem to get the most love when it comes to their respective generations. It's like if I
cannot get the music from that game out of my head since I've been playing it.
Oh yeah.
It's just constantly been playing in my head since I've been replaying Okami.
I'm sorry, but Mean Girls. I'm just the amount of times my little sisters watch that damn movie. Jesus. Also, the full screen version, not the widescreen version, the full screen version.
Ew.
That's hilarious.
Movie doesn't necessarily mean I like the movie or you like the movie. Also doesn't necessarily mean I don't like the movie. But with that said, regardless of how we feel about these two consoles being the top two choices, I thought a comparison between the two would be fun. I've always wanted to compare the two. Right up there on my bucket list.
Blast cars driving too fast down my street with a super soaker bazooka. That's a pretty ballin', like, make video comparing the Super Nintendo and PlayStation 2.
It never died.
Well, I got some bad news for you there, Retro Bird.
Let's first start with the Super
Need to become
Nintendo.
a hero, I guess.
Some of the things it had going for it that
said,
people
heroes
like. First
never
thing
die.
is the purple switches. Wait, hold on. Wrong list. First thing is the 16-bit style, which a lot of people like because in theory, it's an upgraded version of the 8-bit style. And in practice, it is too. At least that's how most look at it. Take what was great about the 8-bit generation and just try to make it even better. 16 bits, baby. Not that we understood exactly what bits were for back in the day. We just knew they were important, like getting good grades. And not that 2D games couldn't look better
basically knew
than
that
they
these
did
games
on
looked
the
better
Super
than the ones on the
Nintendo.
regular
Neo Geo
Nintendo.
says,
Well, basically, 16-bit is basically just it gives you more to play with in terms of like what you can develop. And while I'll say this, the most impressive original like OG NES game for me is still Super Mario Bros. 3 and what they were able to do with just one cartridge. And like just it defies all logic of what the hell they were able to do. And then of course, you know, they put that on Super Mario All-Stars and just like released that and just released it all together. It's like, you see, all of those games are improved, and all of them together, including Super Mario World, fit on one SNES cartridge. That is nuts. That is
The jump in technology, I guess.
exactly.
Hi! But the games do look nice and a great job of representing 2D pixel art in all its glory. And much like people feel the Super Nintendo took the groundwork laid down by
Never
the
could
NES
pronounce
and made
that
it
guy's
even
name.
better, many people also feel like the PlayStation
I am Shahalashra.
its glory.
Let's see.
And much like people feel
Sahasrala.
Sahasrara.
I am Sahasrala. The village elder and the descendant.
I am indeed Sahasrara, the village elder and the descendant of the 7 wise men. I'm sorry.
I guess it does kind of sound like that kind of name, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, yeah. I was going to say, Sahasrara, is your last name Patel? I'm sorry.
Feel the Super Nintendo took the ground.
I was going to say, I wonder if Akash Singh would laugh at that. He would just be like, your Indian accent wasn't the best, but you're onto something.
Work laid down by the NES and made it even better.
Love Akash
Many
Singh.
people also feel like the PlayStation 2 took the groundwork laid down by the PlayStation 1 and made it better. Heck, it even had backwards compatibility to play PS1 games.
There you
And
go.
while it certainly wasn't the first console to
So that was
offer
the whole
backwards
thing. Like, I knew
compatibility,
there were games
I
on
would
PS2 I
argue
wanted to
it's the
play,
console
but you
that
know why I bought it?
popularized-
So I could play Final Fantasy IX.
Yes, and also because you didn't have to throw away your PlayStation 1 games.
Well, I didn't have any. That was the point. I never had a PlayStation 1.
Oh,
So when I got the
okay.
PS2, I was actually super stoked to try Final Fantasy IX. Because I spent a great many days asking my buddy Tanner if I could borrow his strategy guide he always brought to school with him and look through it. Because it looked so fucking cool to me, you know?
Nice.
backwards compatibility in a really big way. And talk about getting aggressive, as if the PS2 didn't have enough games already, roughly over 4,000. It also had the PS1's library. That's like the kid at school who always got the biggest packed lunch, taking somebody else's snacks too. Not many people trying to take my bananas from me nowadays, though. But while the Super Nintendo didn't have as many games as the PlayStation 2, it arguably
popped into
had
my head.
just
You're
as many
crazy.
as the
I
kids
like
and
you,
adults
but you're
like to
crazy.
call them bangers. And what makes them bangers? Well, when they hit you with enjoyment, they hit you with a bang. So buckle up, because with the Super Nintendo, we're talking top-tier bangers. Games like Super Mario World, Super Metroid, Chrono Trigger, Earthbound, Mega Man X.
Okay, I have to ask.
Super Metroid, Chrono Trigger, Earth.
If you had to buy this now, oh my god, how much would that cost?
I think it's pretty expensive.
Yeah.
Also, look at that old K-A rating on the...
I know, right?
I always forget that exists.
I know, because
I mean, I used to know all about those kind of things, but they changed it to E, and I threw that out.
Yeah. Rated E for everyone. Rated T for teen. Rated M for mature. Yeah, I remember the commercials for the games when they were coming out. It's just like, rated M for mature. Every time. And of course, you know, the Mega Man X, which is, so good.
Earthbound, Mega Man X, Final Fantasy VI, A Link to the Past, Super Mario RPG. These are all games that regularly get brought up in discussion as some of the best games of all time. The types of games that if you tell a friend you don't like them, well, they might just pay you a visit to try to change your mind.
Me.
Yeah, this is what I imagine. It's like, I don't really care for A Link to the Past.
Like,
Say what now?
excuse me, sir?
It's just like I'm sorry, but your answer does not compute with my way of thinking. And if you try to say anything otherwise, I'm gonna stab you with this knife.
And it would make sense to me that a console considered the best of all time would also have some of the best games
like
of all time.
Like a different version of the NES game Gunsmoke.
Yeah.
After all, games are ultimately what everybody cares about the most. I mean, some people's love for Super Nintendo games even allows them to look past their hate for its purple switches, if you can believe it. Likewise, the PS2 also has a whole bunch of games that are frequently mentioned among the best of all time as well. What's interesting, though, is that you tend to notice more variance between people's top 10s for the PlayStation 2, no doubt due to the enormous library of games to choose from, whereas for the Super Nintendo, you notice there's a bit more.
Have this vibe and feeling that there's like a criminal amount of people that have not actually played Okami.
Yes.
I'm just like, that's one game that I feel like is totally not talked about and praised quite enough nowadays.
No.
It was when it first came out, but everybody stopped talking about it. And it's probably because Clover shut down, so there'll never be another one. But good God, it's such a good game.
Yes.
or overlap. Not that there isn't some overlap for PS2 as well, and not to suggest that the Super Nintendo doesn't have depth. I mean, one of my favorite games for it is Biker Mice from Mars. How many people would say
my
that?
God.
If you did, you've got yourself a new friend. Wait, don't need that anymore. The Super Nintendo has great games in just about every genre that was around at the time, and typically multiple titles to choose from. Quick little example for you. Say you're a fan of 16-bit bass fishing games. Well, my friend, you've got Super Black Bass and Super Black Bass 2 to choose from. The Super Nintendo has got you covered. So it always rustles my jimmies when the occasional person tries to say the Super Nintendo doesn't have depth. Not that very many people do. What's more common is for people to say the Super Nintendo was just an RPG machine. It had a lot
I'm glad he showed Secret of Mana.
Hell yeah.
of great RPGs, sure, but I've known many people who don't even like RPGs at all, and yet they still love the Super Nintendo. Some people will try to say the same thing about the PS1 only being good for RPGs as well. That's just hoopla. Plenty of loved games
It's
for
more
the
like
PS1 that
RPGs are
aren't
just an
RPGs.
incredibly well represented genre from those
Yeah.
generations.
Well, yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, the whole deal is that if it is a genre that people like to play, and game companies like putting those out, then what's the problem?
I mean, the concept doesn't even make sense. Just because you're really good at one thing doesn't automatically mean you're not good at something else. In fact, quick little story for you. When I was a little kid, I had a teacher who said I had a great imagination, but I'd never be good at anything else. But look at me now. Tongue touching the nose. Eat your heart out, Mrs. Capriola. With both the
I
PlayStation
can't do
2
it.
and Super Nintendo, each console had strong support from just about every big developer at the time, with the major exception for the Super Nintendo being no support from
You know the name I just saw? Yeah, graphic director Tetsuya Nomura. This is Final Fantasy VI on the Super Nintendo, and this dude, who is now currently like one of the lead directors for Square, is just wow.
developer at
I'm
the
at a
time,
loss
with
for words.
the major exception for the Super Nintendo
And
being
Nobuo
no support
Uematsu.
from Sega, in
Come
fact,
on,
quite
dude.
the opposite, and the major exception for the PlayStation 2 obviously being no support from Nintendo, although they didn't get much support
I've
from
been playing
Sega
it on
either,
PC, so,
possibly in part because the PS2
I
killed
like
their
that they actually skipped the line on the PC HD version where he's like, make sure you got a PlayStation memory card, because they don't say that.
Well, you don't really need one on
Kept it
PC.
consistent. Yeah.
Also, I love this here. It's just like oh, there's the PlayStation 2 did murder the Dreamcast, but the Dreamcast had its own issues.
Poor Dreamcast. And not only did the PlayStation 2 have strong support from a wide variety of developers, these developers seem to have a lot of freedom to make all sorts of different games, being that this was the generation that came right before the 7th generation, which a lot of gamers like to accuse of being the time when the video game industry became too big business feeling, with a let's just pump out what will make money attitude, rather than encourage creative games that were taking a risk. Not
To an
that there weren't
extent.
any games
Yeah.
like that after the PS2, especially if
There's
you
still
include
plenty
indie
in that genre, or in that generation, that are actually like really good.
Oh yeah, I
'Cause,
agree.
I mean, Gears of War was one of the first ones that made me like want the 360. Then it had its own like RPG chunk as well that was really nice, like Blue Dragon, Lost Odyssey,
Oh
stuff
yeah.
like that.
Games.
Last Remnant.
But the PS2 definitely had some strong, even if it doesn't sell our console, put it on here anyways vibes. A place where even games like Mr. Mosquito were
Wow.
given a chance. What is kind of
That game-
awkward
I
when it
forgot that
comes to
existed.
That game was so frustrating. At the same time, I did everything I could to beat it.
talking about third-party support on PS2 is that when it comes to the multi-platform games, even though most multi-platform games sold best on the PS2 because that's the console most people had, most people nowadays are willing to admit that the PS2 version was often the worst, outside of some of the games that benefited from the extra shoulder buttons as well as a few other things, with the Xbox and even GameCube versions often being better than the PS2 version of a game. And yet,
especially
lots of multiplayer.
Splinter Cell. I had the first Splinter Cell on PlayStation 2. The game is not even properly functional on PS2.
No, it isn't. Well,
in order for them to make it work, they had to make a lot of the light fixtures that are possible to break on Xbox and the PC version, like, non-destructible. And so there's, like, levels that are just basically, like, without good solutions on how to get through them because you can't actually break the lights where you should be able to. So, I remember that being a big problem with it.
Well, that's how it goes, man. You know,
it's pretty recognized that the GameCube and Xbox were more powerful systems.
Yes.
But it's just they didn't quite have the same, like, overall library that PlayStation 2 had.
Well, no. And also because, you know, Nintendo is up their own ass with, like, DRM. They're just like, they were just like, oh, no, we can't have any, like, way for them to pirate the games, so let's just use these mini discs. Never mind the fact that mini discs are still capable of being pirated. It's
Plat games are remembered by people as PS2 games because that's the console most people had, despite being available elsewhere and as better versions. So a huge chunk of its library. Meanwhile, the Super Nintendo didn't share as many multi-plats with its main competitor, the Sega Genesis, with the era being famous for having entirely different versions of games, even if they shared the same title a lot of the times.
One of the main ones I noticed, because my buddy that lived next door had it for his Genesis, was Pitfall: The Mayan Adventure.
Oh, yeah?
And I got it for Super Nintendo, and you can definitely tell the differences between the two. Like, they have the same level layouts and design and stuff, but, like, the graphics are obviously better on the Genesis, as is the music.
Yes.
And the sound effects and stuff.
2 had a large number of exclusives outside of the multiplats, and most of its multiplats were typically perfectly playable on the PS2. Another huge chunk of the PS2's library were games in a certain category that the Super Nintendo simply could not keep up with. Bad games. But here's the thing. With the PS2 having a library of roughly over 4,000 games worldwide, it could afford to have a ton of shovelware on it and still have more than enough room left for plenty of good stuff. I guess if
there's
you
not
didn't
even
know
just
what
like
you
the
were...
well-known good games on PS2. There's a lot of like hidden gem games that people never fucking touched.
Yeah, for
like,
instance,
Stretch Panic, Hokage the Shadow King.
Yeah. Psyops, which I still say is one of my favorite action games of all time.
I know one of those Lord of the Rings games is actually pretty dope because I played it.
Well, both of the ones I have up there, the Lord of the Rings, Two Towers, and Return of the King, both of those are like amazing. They were both made by the same studio with like Wingnut, with actual like help from Wingnut Studios, like Peter Jackson's studio, and it was awesome.
And then you got Dead or Alive Extreme 2.
Yes.
Which, in my opinion, was a fighting game that was pretty advanced for its time.
Yes. The Burnout series, I had Burnout 3 and Burnout Revenge, the 2 best Burnout games.
Oh, the Bouncer.
Huh?
The Bouncer. That was a Square Enix, like, fighter that was actually really awesome.
Yeah, ATV Off-Road Fury 1 and 2. I mean, sheesh. Manhunt, another one that... It was an adult game that didn't get much, like, in terms of love of critics, but I love that game. Then there's Mercenaries, which, in terms of, like, a massive open world and the fact that, depending on who you choose, you can understand the different things that are going on. It's awesome. Smuggler's Run, that's another one that's really good that doesn't get enough recognition. The Stuntman games, Time Splitters... But yeah, either way, the PlayStation 2 library, one of the best libraries.
Were buying, you'd be more likely to purchase a turd, but The Super Nintendo's library wasn't turd-free either. You gotta watch out.
Yeah.
What about first-party support, though? I think most people would say that Nintendo was a better game developer than Sony, seeing as Nintendo exclusives always carry so much weight. But perhaps more than anything, the determining factor between picking the Super Nintendo and
PlayStation 2 games were first party.
Well,
it's like I wasn't really familiar with like what Sony was actually publishing back then.
Well, they were more hush hush about it. They had some studios that they bought, but for the most part, it was like God of War, for instance, is owned by that's Sony Santa Monica.
Yeah.
So the God of War games, those
Konami was still doing good back during that time too. So like they were one of the biggest things that I associate with the PlayStation 2.
Yeah. The Jak series, Jak and Daxter, Jak 2 and Jak 3, developed by Naughty Dog, which was purchased by Sony. Yeah, there's a lot, dude.
PlayStation 2 for some.
Oh, dude, the Crash Bandicoot series is what. Oh, that's PS1 though.
Somebody could just be which era of gaming they prefer more, which could very well have to do with which era you grew up with. Personally, I fall into sort of a weird spot where I was a kid for both of them. Granted, a much older kid for the PS2. Who am I kidding? I've never stopped being a kid. But in any case, there's people who won't play anything older than the PS2, and people who won't play anything newer than the Super Nintendo. And even if somebody was willing to play both consoles, the games on each console are very different from each other. I know some people who, once video games had changed enough from how they used to be, thought, wait a minute, I don't think I want to be on this ride anymore. I don't like where video games are going. The Super Nintendo came during an era where 2D games were essentially having their biggest hurrah. Then came the 5th gen, which shifted to mostly 3D with a handful of holdouts. But by the time the PS2 rolled around, it was pretty much all about 3D games, and game design had changed drastically by this point to go along with the way game designers could implement movement through open 3D space. And sure, there were still the occasional 2D games on the PS2. Some of the Japanese exclusive shoot-'em-ups are my personal favorites, but most of the bigger budget efforts were going to be in 3D. So a lot of it will come down to which era of gaming you prefer more. And personally, it's the 16-bit era for me. So my answer would be Super Nintendo. To me, the visual style will continue to age beautifully and lend it itself to more tightly designed gameplay. I also think one of its greatest strengths that doesn't get talked about enough is that its library had both games that felt like longer adventures, as well as shorter, more concise games with arcade sensibilities. The Super Nintendo was
Secret of Mana is quite the long game. Like I've played it a lot, and I've still never beaten it because it's so long.
Yeah.
Video games forward, as well as honoring what had made them so awesome up to that point. At least, that's how I see it. But how do you see it? For this video's question, I thought it would be fun to not only answer which of these consoles is your favorite, but also which two consoles would you select as a fun matchup for a greatest console of all time debate. Remember, 3DO versus the PlayStation Vita is still available. So with that, leave your answers down below, and I will see ya in the next video.
Oh. Gonna fuck that disc up.
Okay, fair enough. Both consoles have their advantages, and both of them have their disadvantages. I would say in terms of first-party support, Super Nintendo definitely has the edge, but in terms of overall depth of the amount of games, PlayStation 2 is terrifying with how many games it had. In terms of features, it's hard to beat the DVD player for the PlayStation 2. Personally, for me, I think that's the main edge that it gets. In terms of games, I could play both libraries and never be bored. But at the same time, I know that when it comes to like things that I can do outside of gaming, the PlayStation 2 has way more options. Specifically the DVD player. And a few other things. But for the most part, yeah, that DVD player, considering that DVDs are almost a dead format, I mean, it's on the verge of obsolescence, but there are still plenty of DVD collections that you can get out there. And if the world ends, you can still entertain yourself with a PlayStation 2 endlessly if you have access to those DVDs and access to the library of games.
For the fact that watching DVDs on your PlayStation 2 will shorten the life of its disc drive.
That's true.
Because it has to constantly spin a DVD to play a movie, whereas it only has to spin a game disc when it's loading something.
Oh, true, yeah. Well.
But still cool to have the option.
Yes, as always. But
to be honest, if it were me and it was somebody like Mr. Beast and was like, you get to stay in this room for 100 days and I'm going to pay you a chunk of money if you last, and all you can have to entertain yourself during this time is either this Super Nintendo with its entire library or this PlayStation 2 with its entire library.
PlayStation 2.
I love the Super Nintendo a lot, but I think I would still pick PlayStation 2.
I would too.
Because there are still like games that I haven't played on PS2 that I still want to play as well. Stuff that like I never got a chance to check out.
I was gonna say 100 days. I could entertain myself for 100 days with all the PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 1 games. I could entertain myself
for like half of the time easily just by playing Grand Theft Auto, I'm sure.
Well, there you go.
Like playing through Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3 again would be a highlight. I would definitely be able to play through like Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2 probably.
Yeah. I would also say the Twisted Metal, the Tony Hawk games.
I don't think I would have time to play everything I would actually want to play during that 100 days on PlayStation 2.
No.
Like, even if that was like all I was doing, I would probably still be like, oh, can you leave me 5 more days? I was going to start like something else.
I was going to start Mercenaries.
Yeah, I was about to play through Silent Hill 3 again, something like that. Or Silent Hill 2 and 3.
Yeah. There's so much. And PlayStation 2 in terms of like just like that entire library, yeah.
And I mean, some of those games hold up today. Like, you could play them today, and it feels like they just came out recently. Like Okami.
Yeah.
Especially because of its art style, man. That game has aged like fine wine.
I would say
it's still fantastic.
I would say Warriors. Warriors. When I played it again on PlayStation 2, I had to adjust the like controls a little bit, but dude, it still played great. Same thing with Resident Evil 4 on PlayStation. Dude, Resident Evil 4 on PlayStation 2, wow. That was something. But
I know like the Silent Hill games don't really hold up art style-wise to modern lighting and such, but they're still really good.
Yes, absolutely.
There's so many games that like started in 3D and people were like, 3D is going to suck because all these games are going to age like ass. Because like they're gonna look really bad one day, and I'm just like, yeah. I mean, compared to what you can play now, but like some of them look really impressive for the time they came out as well, and are still worth playing.
Yeah, I agree. Well,
yeah, that's your all's homework. If you never got to play through the PlayStation 2 library and you have access to that nowadays, you'll need to check out Okami. That's my recommendation.
Please do. All right, so let us all know what you all thought. Which one do you think is the superior console? Do you think Super Nintendo wins out, or do you think PlayStation 2? Or is there one on here that he didn't really talk about that you really wish could be considered the greatest console of all time? Feel free to let us know.
Personally, my runner-up is PlayStation 4.
Yeah?
I think PlayStation 4's catalog is fucking dope. Like, and when you compare it to like PS2, it almost is as good.
Probably so. I would probably say for me, like PlayStation 2, Super Nintendo, PS1. Man. Probably Wii. Wii or like GameCube. And
like,
then
there's a few Wii games I'm alright with, but I consider it overall to have a pretty weak library.
That's fair.
Especially the Wii U. The Wii U has like no.
Oh, Wii U. No, Wii U doesn't count.
The
Wii U is just
the
like...
Wii still. I'm just like, it's a little bit weak on what's available for it. There's
Would you say that it's
Twilight
Wii?
Princess and the Metroid Prime trilogy.
Beautiful Joe, Super Smash Bros.
You can play Beautiful Joe on Wii?
Yeah, through GameCube. Backwards compatibility.
You can play GameCube. Yeah, I'm just counting the Wii.
Oh, okay. Yeah, fair enough. But Smash Brothers Brawl, I would also say, oh gosh.
I can't remember the freaking name of it right now, but there's
Mario Kart Wii.
A really good shooter that
Killer 7.
it's like a sci-fi type thing where you have like kind of a wing type jetpack and you move your character like around the screen while also aiming the direction they shoot.
I can't remember.
It's a sequel to another game and it was on Wii, and when I found out about it I went out and found a copy and I forgot what it's called, but it was dope.
Hold on, let's see. Best Wii games. Super Mario Brothers Wii. The Mario Galaxy games, of course. Donkey Kong Country Returns. Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Twilight Princess. Mario Kart Wii. Wii Sports. Let's see. Skyward Sword, which some people say is hit or miss. Red Steel 2. Resident Evil 4. Yeah, I forgot the Wii release on that. Okami on Wii. Dead Space Extraction, No More Heroes, and let's see, yeah.
Sin and Punishment Star Successor, that was it.
Oh, okay.
That's a dope game.
So, yeah, there's a lot on here that you could do. Cooking Mama, Mario Power Tennis, yeah, Punch Out.
Muramasa is a really good game.
Yes.
I got to play it on PlayStation Vita with the updated version. I never got to beat it, but it was kick-ass.
Nice. Well.
Oh, and I forgot that they did Okami HD for the Wii.
Yeah. It was great. No More Heroes as well was also a really good release. What was that one? It was It was in black and white, and it was like ultra violent. I can't remember the name of it.
Mad World.
Yes, yeah. Thank you. But yeah,
I heard that was good, but I never got to play it.
Yeah, I watched a friend of mine play it. It was a lot of fun.
My main thing with the Wii, like if I wanted to play one thing, Mario. It's gonna be the Metroid Prime trilogy, pretty much.
Of course, yeah.
It's just the best way to play it.
Yes. All right.
Twilight Princess is also really damn fun on Wii.
Yes. All right. Well, everybody, that's going to do it for this one. We spent almost an hour talking about this damn thing, so hopefully...
What happens with video games?
Oh, yeah. We can't help ourselves.
Hopefully it doesn't take me that long to edit it.
I hope not. We'll see. But anyway, that's going to do it, everyone. Thank you all very much for tuning in. And I guess until next time, signing off, I'm Nate.
I am Nick.
Y'all be good people. Take care. Bye-bye.